Hello and welcome back to Efficiency Optimized, Unlocking the Full Potential of Multiple Impacts. We're back with season 2 of this show where we try to create a narrative about the multiple benefits of energy efficiency and connect the dots between the theoretical applicability and the real-life applications of multiple benefits. The season 2 of the podcast is hosted by the SEED MICAT project, supporting energy efficiency deployment with the multiple impact calculation tool, which is the follow-up project after the MICAT project, which extends the scope of and improves the MICATool to allow the analysis of complementary paths and options to climate neutrality. Hello, everyone. And today, in the first episode of the season number 2 of this podcast show, we will be discussing what is next after the MICAT project. As a reminder, the SEED MICAT project, which is the host of the series, focuses on calculating the multiple impacts of energy efficiency, as well as the relevance and political needs for tools that quantify these benefits at the local, national, and EU level. Furthermore, the SEED MICAT project extends this energy efficiency focus towards renewable energy to make both of them comparable. And in today's episode, we will wrap up what happened before, but also looking forward what is to come in the SEED MICAT project and the work that lies ahead. I'm Frederic Berger from Fraunhofer ISI, and I've been coordinating the theoretical and scientific work in the MICAT project, and I'll be hosting this episode with Niklas Reinfandt, who is the coordinator of the SEED MICAT project. So great to have you on the show, Niklas.
Hi, Frederic. And yes, my name is Niklas Reinfandt. I'm working in Fraunhofer ISI for 2 years now. My background is chemistry, so I studied chemistry and also did my PhD there. But now, since the last 2 years, I'm working more into in the field of energy policies and energy efficiency. So happy to be here and happy to be also part of this new exciting project.
Yeah, great. Great to have you here. So first of all, you did have a look into the MICATool as well. I mean, you were in the same working group. So looking back at the MICAT in a kind of a short wrap up, what were the main things as an outsider that were like striking you as relevant, and what was the general sense that you got from this project?
I guess the most impressive part for the whole or about the whole project as an outsider was like the objective to keep this relatively complex topic and tool relatively easy and like approachable for nearly everybody. So I guess that's really an important approach, so that everybody is able to have a look at this tool, to have a look at different multiple impacts and co-benefits of energy efficiency and get a better understanding of the whole topic. So I guess that's, at least from my perspective, was really impressive to see this approach. And as we will be seeing later in this episode, it's really important that a broad audience can connect to this topic and get a better understanding of energy efficiency and the related multiple impacts. As you worked in this project for more or less the whole duration, so what are your, like, if you have to wrap up the whole project, what were the main objectives and your most important results in the end?
Right, yeah. So I joined a little late, a year late, but I think what really struck us all was we kind of underestimated the complexity of moving from a past where multiple impacts were mainly used to look at specific scenarios, specific case studies, and kind of get this into a predictive approach. So instead of saying we have a very specific use case where we can look for data very specifically, moving to something where we would need data for all kinds of combinations. So it wasn't enough to look at building insulation in Germany where you have a lot of data, but the same calculation should be possible for a very specific measure in the transport sector in Malta, and you still would need the same data. And that is something we definitely underestimated. Nevertheless, I think we really put together something quite impressive in this tool. There's still working very swiftly. So when I look at a lot of models, which is completely different and of course far more precise with results, they're going to take a weekend to calculate, and this tool does it in a second. with the caveats and limitations, of course, but still, I think that is something that is quite impressive. With this, and in a way, it also keeps on the promotional work around multiple impact calculation that the previous projects Combi and Odyssey Muir have done. And I think in this sense, it has been quite important because we've heard so often from stakeholders that this is such a relevant topic and they would love to do this quantification, but just don't have the capacities to do it. And this is something this tool can really help alleviate. So that is something that's been quite rewarding.
So maybe speaking about the stakeholder interaction and stakeholder involvement in the precursor project on the MICAT project, maybe you can also wrap up a little bit the main points of the stakeholder interaction, because I guess it's maybe a little bit easier to understand than also the follow-up stakeholder plans for the SEED MICAT project.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was very interesting because we had those stakeholder involvements on the EU level, talking with EU officials, which is it's a very theoretical approach, I would say, because every legislation that comes from the EU has to pass through so many steps and national implementation and so on. And there's a lot of high-level expertise. And in contrast, on the local level, it was very hands-on, all these approaches. It was always very much, how can we really do this in everyday life? How can we incorporate it in the processes of our everyday life in a municipality? And in between, of course, the governments as well. So that was very interesting to see what the preferences were, and also how there was, among the indicators, strong shifts within the period of this project, because it started before the invasion of Ukraine, and before there were things that were seen as niche. Something like import dependence was not really considered that relevant across all countries, and that quickly changed, of course. So I think that's been very interesting, and as scientists, we always have a very particular look at a lot of these things, and multiple impacts for very long have been a topic that has just been swirling around the scientific community, and seeing how different in parts policymakers are looking at this topic has been really important for how we develop this tool and what is actually relevant to them. So I think it was a lot of work, let's put it this way, but there's also quite a lot that came out of it. You've been drafting the main part of this new project. So what would you say? What are the main things that the SEED MICAT will have to focus on that haven't been addressed in the MICAT project till now?
So maybe to explain this a little bit better, I will make it a little bit broader the approach, and first explain a little more in general what question, or let's say research question, lies or are background for both projects. So as we all know, or at least should know, energy efficiency and renewables appear as a key strategy in different climate neutrality pathways nowadays. Nevertheless, there are still a lot of fossil fuels predominant in many energy systems, and these need to be phased out rapidly. However, in the meantime, pathways reaching climate neutrality in the middle of the century, as compared to unsustainable pathways maintaining substantial amounts of fossil fuels, are now clearly in the spotlight of the discussions and also of the scientific investigations. Based on this, there are two important questions which require further analytical support and are also the backbone for both the MICAT project and more importantly, even to the SEED MICAT project. So the first question, which is also the main question for the MICAT project and the MICAT tool, would be, what speed of phasing out fossil fuels leads overall to the highest benefits? So can in particular higher shares of energy efficiency more quickly phase out fossil fuels for the benefits of societies and the environment? So that's basically what we are trying to investigate in the MICAT tool. We are trying to have a look at different benefits of energy efficiency, try to monetize them, and then get a clearer look on the bigger picture and to discuss, okay, what energy efficiency measures are maybe best suited to approach different pathways towards climate neutrality. So this question is already discussed a little bit in the past and also as the core of the MICAT project, but there's also second question, which is more importantly, if we approach the SEED MICAT project and if we have a stronger emphasis on the future right now. So, and the second question is more like in the direction of, are all pathways we have a look at to climate neutrality are equally rewarding to society as a whole, or are there broader aspects to be taken into account, notably when it comes to the role of energy efficiency options as compared to carbon neutral supply options, for example, renewable supply options. So, as I've already explained earlier, now pathways with a lot of renewable energy or with a high share of renewable energy generation are clearly in the spotlight. So it's not like always the best to just compare like the energy efficiency solution with a fossil fuel solution, but now we have also to compare different carbon neutral solutions or energy efficiency solutions versus carbon neutral supply side solutions.
That sounds quite theoretical. Can you elaborate on how this is actually implemented in the project?
As we have discussed for the MICAT project, we only had a look at energy efficiency solutions and also only on the demand side. So we didn't look at the supply side or on renewable energy generation aspects. So this is one main objective we have now in the SEED MICAT project. So we want to be able to compare supply side measures, especially renewable energy integration into the system, with energy efficiency measures. And therefore, we have to extend the methodology of the MICATool towards renewable energy sources, for example. And in addition, we also will have a look at certain more specific topics which are like really relevant for this extension, such as, for example, biodiversity, or as Frederic already mentioned, the import dependency, to also be able to extend these areas of the methodology and to be able to provide in the end a comprehensive framework to assess multiple impacts for different climate neutrality pathways, and not only focusing on energy efficiency solutions of the demand side, but also providing like analytical approaches to compare these kind of solutions with supply side solutions, especially carbon neutral supply side solutions. And for this, it's really essential to reevaluate our approach, because, as already mentioned, indirectly, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions itself is not always a differentiating criterion anymore compared to scenarios with fossil fuels, as all pathways aim to achieve climate neutrality by mid-century. However, at the same time, other impacts such as land use, material use, employment, or import dependency and energy security gain importance and are really important to be able to compare these different aspects and to make them comparable in general. So I guess that's the first main objective we try to aim for in this new follow-up project.
Maybe be interesting to address why it came up to make this comparable between renewables and energy efficiency. Of course, instinctively it makes sense to want to be able to compare those scenarios, but it was also due to some major legislative shifts. So in the framework of the Fit for 55 package, the energy efficiency directive was recast and includes now an energy efficiency first principle, which is quite interesting because this is implemented in a law, although typically when we look at principles, things like the precautionary principle or the polluter pays principle, those are things that are incorporated in several laws, and they're like overarching principles that are then clearly defined in other texts. And here we have a principle that is directly defined that isn't really defined, but it's like directly included in the legislative text. Basically, what it says is that whenever major investments in supply side technologies or energy related technologies are made, it should be checked whether it would be easier, or not easier, but cheaper, more cost effective to actually do energy efficiency instead. And this has brought forward this requirement to make it comparable whether energy efficiency would be more fruitful than renewables and make them directly comparable among themselves, because this Article 3 ED, the energy efficiency first principle, specifically states that wider benefits should be included in this calculation, which directly points to multiple impacts. And there I found what really struck me was what a EU official told me, that basically this tool is really relevant in this sense because they can't write legislation where they're not sure that all member states could comply with it. And the MICAT tool can be exactly that, this tool that allows the Commission to have requirements to the member states because they know the member states can comply with it. So that is something I think the tool has to deliver on, but that makes it really interesting.
Yes, maybe to go a little bit deeper on this aspect. So there are several requirements in the in the recast Energy Efficiency Directive, which are linked to energy efficiency first. So this principle you're mentioning, and wider benefits, or mentioning links where these wider benefits could be helpful, and where the MICAT tool could be helpful to support member states or to support scientists in the analysis of these type of things and to put the principle into life in the end. So first of all, as you already mentioned, the EED recast now demands that in applying, and now I will quote the EED, in applying the energy efficiency first principle, member states should promote and, where cost-benefit analysis are required, ensure the application of and make publicly available cost-benefit methodologies that allow proper assessment of the wider benefits of energy efficiency solutions, where appropriate, taking into account the entire life cycle and long-term perspective, system and cost efficiency, security of supply, and quantification from societal, health, economic, and climate neutrality perspectives, sustainability and circular economy principles in transition to climate neutrality. Relatively long sentence, but what it basically says is what we discussed earlier. We have somehow, if we want to decide on a political level, whether we aim for example, to extend our supply side infrastructure, or whether it's maybe easier to just put in place new energy efficiency laws, we have to assess not only the direct energy savings or energy cost savings of these measures, for example, of the energy efficiency measures, but also to put it on an equal footing to assess the multiple impacts or wider benefits and the monetization values in the end, because in many cases, energy cost savings alone are not a clear argument for energy efficiency measures. So we have to broaden our perspective on this problem to have a fair and reasonable discussion in this policy decisions. And that's not all where the tool or why this co-benefits are helpful. The Article 3 of the ED also requires member states to address the impact on energy poverty in applying the energy efficiency first principle. And as you may know from previous seasons of our from the previous season of this podcast, energy poverty is also one of the indicators we have a look at in the MICAT tool. So again, here it's important to have a look at multiple impacts addressing energy poverty and being able to support the deployment of this energy efficiency first principle. And last but not least, the Article 3 also provides for member states to report on how the energy efficiency first principle has been integrated into their NECP progress reports, including an assessment of the application and benefits of the principle. And there it's more or less the same. We can use the tool to put the whole principle into practice and to support member states while they have to analyze these benefits or this impacts, and while they have to provide this information also in their reportings. As a consequence, we have a second main objective in SEED MICAT, and this second main objective, which is an extension, it's like running in parallel to the extension of the framework, but it's equally important, is the capacity building aspect of the tool. So really aiming to have an extensive capacity building focus in the project, to show the people there, to teach them the tool, to also get feedback from the users, to be able to further develop the tool and to improve the tool for all these tasks which lie ahead of us.
I think there's a very interesting point you mentioned that we also heard in a lot of our stakeholder workshops. Basically, multiple impacts allowed for different narratives that are very tangible to different people. And the EU is a very heterogeneous collection of countries, is quite a good place to find this out, because we were having those stakeholder workshops in different countries, and in Germany and in Italy and in Poland on a national level. And we really saw that the main driver for doing those energy efficiency measures were quite different. So in Germany, there's this kind of understanding that's the right thing to do, although we don't always do it. But then in Poland, the main driver was the bad air. They have massive issues with air quality, and that was the main reason to do energy efficiency. And in Italy, it was more about tight budgets and trying to find where the bottom line looks best. And if you were to expand this across Europe, you'd get like a myriad of more multiple impacts that are most tangible to governments and populations there. And I think that is very relevant because, as you just said, very often, even if the bottom line adds up for energy efficiency, it is not very attractive to do it. And it sometimes needs narratives that are more tangible to people to really push them to do those things that are actually cost effective in the end. There's a reason there's a cost effectiveness gap, a gap between what would be cost effective to do and what is actually implemented. And I think in there, for this to be exploited, the capacity building that is done in SEED MICAT or is planned is quite interesting.
Okay, now we have discussed more or less what are the two new main objectives of the SEED MICAT project. So maybe we can have a really short deep dive, or let's say a little bit more outlook into the topic of extending the methodology. So maybe you can give a little bit on first outlook on what are the difficulties, why it's important, and so on.
All right, so there's some complexities that come in here, and our colleagues from Wuppertal Institute are addressing this right now and working on some kind of framework to combine those renewables or supply side solutions to energy efficiency, which is quite difficult because in the power market or just the supply side market is very much about capacities, and energy efficiency is more about, well, energy volumes. And to find there some kind of way to combine this will be one thing, although there's ways, of course, but also all the methodologies in the MICATool have been developed in a way that all the data is there to calculate it accordingly. And now we have the same issues with the supply side. We'll have to check that those methodologies are compatible and see also for some indicators when those are compared, the results are quite similar. So looking at how do we develop this indicator in a sense where you see the difference between renewables and energy efficiency. So there's quite some work ahead that the partners that have developed the indicators in the MICAT project are now going to work on in the SEED MICAT project.
I already mentioned that in addition to this more general extension of the tool for the renewable energy sources and the look at the supply side, we have also some focus studies. Maybe we can also give a short outlook on these focus studies. So we have planned 3 focus studies, and there's one focus study led by you, so maybe you can explain it.
Right. So in the MICAT project, one thing where we kind of hit a boundary was monetizing import dependence or energy security in general, because it's very difficult to really distinguish the cost of, well, importing energy. What is it? Is it the price differential between domestic energy and foreign energy? Because then it would be positive to import energy because very often it's cheaper than producing domestically. Or is it the cost of crisis events discounted over the period of time? So there's quite a complexity, and even there, the question is what is now directly linked to the import dependence and what would have happened anyways. And we're trying to assess this now in a quantitative way looking at crisis events and the costs that have emerged from there, and trying to discount this over time in order to be able to monetize import dependence and monetize the benefits of reducing import dependence by doing energy efficiency programs or supply side programs to reduce import dependence or widen the supply diversity. So that's something we're working on, and hopefully the result will be one that we can use to monetize this benefit, because it is a benefit with a huge potential. And especially in these times that we have right now, with unsecure providers of energy, it's a thing that is commonly asked of us and cynical not to have.
Exactly. And then we have a second focus study, which will deal a little bit more in an explorative way with the topic of biodiversity, because as we now extend the tool towards the renewable energy supply side options, this biodiversity topic is one which is important for both the energy efficiency solutions, but also for the supply side aspects. So these could be, for example, indicators which are more straightforward. For example, the land use. If we have a look at, for example, wind and solar power, then we need, or in the end, it's land use which is needed. So we use some land for deploying these power generation sources, and this can have an impact, on direct impact on biodiversity. That's a relatively easy example, but there are a lot of more difficult and more indirect impacts, of course. So there's a lot of work to do, a lot of different venues to explore, but this will be really on the more explorative side of things in the end, and really like getting first thoughts on this topic on the paper, and like starting the discussion on this topic, I would say, and then seeing whether we can implement some of these more straightforward indicators such as land use directly in the tool already. And then we have a third one. Maybe you can.
Yeah, so it's about the impact of energy efficiency on system resilience. So in times of crisis, whether the system gets more stable if more energy efficiency, or also supply side. So in general, how does it affect system stability in difficult times? That is addressed through a focus study, mainly by E3M. And we'll be keen to see if there's results we can incorporate in the model as well. Right. So with this said, I think it would be interesting to have a short look what is ahead of us. What could we do in this season 2 to keep you guys posted?
Of course, we will give you more details on this extension of the methodology, and explaining a little bit how we handle these and this extension in the end, and what are the results of assessing wider impacts or multiple impacts of renewable energy supply side options, for example. We are also planning to give you some more insights into the focus study results. What are the results there? How can we use these results to improve the tool, but also to help putting the energy efficiency first principle into practice? And last but not least, I'm sure there will be some interesting results regarding the stakeholder interaction in the SEED MICAT project. As in the MICAT project, we are planning to do it on several policy levels, so on the local level, but also on the national level and the EU level. And there we have a lot of exciting things planned, workshops planned, interactions planned, and I'm sure there will be a lot of interesting results which will be worth sharing with all of you.
All right. Well, thanks, Niklas, for joining in. And for those of you listening in today's episode, thanks for tuning in. And we encourage you to follow the progression of our project here. To engage with us, follow the SEED MICAT project and continue discussions on Twitter at MICAT_EU or on LinkedIn at MICAT Multiple Impact Calculation Tool. Tune in again to follow along, and until next time, where we discuss how multiple benefits for energy efficiency affects you.